If there was one word that differentiates the Crew from its competitors since the series' inception, it would be identity. The original's gritty and illegal street racing focused theme was one of the last iterations of this archetype. Its sequel, The Crew 2, radically switched up its presentation and tone to that blending into the modern fleet of festival-stylized racers. This choice made going from its predecessor feel like a whiplash, and in hand, led to the series having such far ends between each installment. It never had a chance to form any sort of identity of its own, blasting forwards towards today with the all-new, sequel or not, sequel, Motorfest. Motorfest goes all in on the festival racer theme, ditching the tried and true locale of America for a colorful and upbeat Hawaii setting. It's easy to look at a game here like this and claim at face value that it's simply a Forza Horizon clone, but that's what this video is here to judge. Does the Crew Motorfest do enough to set itself apart as a true competitor to the big dogs in this genre, or does it fall victim to the tropes and tribulations of its counterparts? Well, let's take a deep dive into the Crew Motorfest and dig up the truth, shall we? Motorfest's stunted sense of self-fulfilled character is, as mentioned before, what limits this game's potential more than any other of its nuances or attributes. And where I find this to be far and away most apparent is how it presents and tackles its single-player campaign. Do not get me wrong, I have a lot of good to say here as well. In fact, on a gameplay level, this is probably one of the best racing game campaigns I've played in genuine years. But my issues stem more from what it's lacking to make it one of the greats. To really demonstrate what's missing, we first have to talk about what we have, and thankfully, Motorfest takes some creative strides from the relatively tame and tedious career in the Crew 2. Motorfest embarks the player on a journey throughout its series of 15 playlists. Now, don't get post-traumatic horizon disorder from the word playlist. Motorfest takes the concept of themed playlists and truly runs with it. If you've ever played Driver San Francisco, you'll remember that many events would be throwbacks to certain movies or pop culture references. Motorfest takes this concept to another level, theming its playlist to certain eras or facets of car culture. They really don't skimp out on these either. The Vintage Americana playlist, for example, ditches the game's standard UI for a more old-school layout as we move throughout dirt track racing in the 1950s, working our way up to the retro-futuristic aesthetic of the 80s. There's also a few events which completely ditch your minimap, making you use photos exclusively, taking influence from the Crew 2's treasure hunts and repurposing that concept into a fun new event type. The Japan-themed playlist transforms the entire city into a very 90s neon light extravaganza, placing events on Toge-inspired sections of the map, modifying the AI cars to fit in with a modern tuner archetype. Almost each and every one of these playlists has something special to differentiate itself. Motorfest is a slap in the face to games like Horizon 5, whose theming of playlists and updates are about as deep as a puddle. Now I know it may be a bit of a trigger word thanks to this, but the Donut Media playlist in Motorfest is a perfect example of what to do. Motorfest added in not only fully recorded and edited cinematics of the Crew, but some theme-exclusive events, such as this side-by-side head-to-head showdown, an old Gran Turismo coffee break style event which locks a Raptor in cruise control going up in increments, challenging the player to avoid cones without using the brakes at all. There's also one where you swap between high and low car on the fly, seeing which can be faster, alongside some props and surprisingly not awful dialogue to tie it all together. The Crew 2 faced a lot of discourse around the prevalence of planes, boats, and race cars. Motorfest took the feedback from fans in regards to this and streamlined its disciplines to a level which I found leagues more enjoyable. For starters, each one gets a playlist dedicated to them. Motorsports, for example, takes you throughout the ascending ranks of racing, and there's some pretty neat additions like pit stops and tire wear to spice these up. Boats have also been relegated to their own, and have so much more drama than before with the addition of heavy storm waves and wind bursts, which leave you wrangling the waters if you're determined to win. And hey, monster truck racing is genuinely enjoyable now. no longer feeling like purgatory to go through. Most of what we've mentioned so far has been exceedingly positive. So what exactly are those quibbles we mentioned at the start of this segment? The most prominent one to me is that there is truly zero semblance of progress throughout the entire game. You'll go through an introductory race as expected, pick out a first car, but after that, your only task is to complete the 15 playlists in the game, and while they're great, there's nothing in between them. Complete playlist, on to the next one, ad nauseum. This leads to a continuous feeling of incompletion, exacerbated by the complete lack of an ending. Once you're done the last of the 15 playlists, that's it. You don't get any completion reward, race, heck, even a message or achievement at all. It's a real buzzkill. The lack of, well, anything alongside a playlist isn't the only missing link here. There are no real characters apart from your create your own character, which, by the way, it's in the running for the worst character creation screen of all time. It's at this point you even wonder why they have it at all. If you get super technical, there's a ripoff of Horizon's Kira with Kara, subtle, and a few repeating voice lines from, I've genuinely forgot her name. Right, Hinata. Hinata and the other announcers continue the trope in every racer these games of having the most meaningless and wince-worthy lines, which just leave you distracted rather than adding anything to the racing experience. The worst of which is the announcer for Electric Odyssey, who has the worst pronunciation of Porsche Taycan ever. To finish up, I did want to mention while there is little to no career progression throughout the game, you do have to put in work if you want to be able to drive the cars you want. It's not overtly grindy, but it's far more than most games in the modern era, which is for me a good thing. This may seem like a really minuscule complaint, and it may change over time, but at the moment the best way to make money in the game is to run up Kiss Me Mosey, which is a 2-minute long race, leading to excessive boredom. I do wish there was a race such as New York to San Fran in the Crew 2, which was so long it's near impossible to memorize every corner, and was far more satisfying to get a big money reward at the end of a long race instead of little dribbles which add up over time. Now before anyone mentions, there is one race that's about 15 minutes long, but it simply doesn't pay enough to justify doing it over the shorter races, which end up adding more in the meantime. This is one of the many ways going to a smaller map affects the package as a whole, but there's more to go over in that vein. So let's switch up onto the topic of maps in the Crew. Crews of yesteryear were known for one thing, and it's what I personally loved the most about the series. Having maps which spanned thousands of square kilometers in size ignited that TDU fan inside of me. Having a map of that enormous scale leads the explorer and cruiser in us to always be roaming, always be discovering, something that competitors with smaller maps just can't match. So when Motorfest was revealed to be downsizing to a smaller, yet more dense version of Hawaii, it was an immediate turnoff. I don't fall for the smaller and more detailed maps, as any and all of that initial cool factor of detail fades away the second you drive past it the first couple of times, leaving you with a tiny map you know like the back of your hand, yet don't enjoy any of it. Motorfest for the most part hasn't left me with that feeling. Hawaii is thankfully stunningly pretty, with highly saturated and colorful environments which match the upbeat tone of the game as a whole. This is one of very few racers these days where the color palette chosen matches the general vibe and tone of the game. Foliage and vegetation are dense, especially in the jungle sections. It feels very much like what we had in Test Drive Unlimited 2, but on a much more compact scale and with a little less variation throughout that map. That variation, however, is replaced with that attention to detail. You'll find tons of shops and restaurants all throughout this world, and for the most part, it feels truly lived in. You can get most of that explorer feeling as these roads are long, and have plenty of gas stations thrown along the major routes for those who want a little break in between cruising. There's this strange feeling while exploring and reviewing this map, and it's that it strikes a strange in-between Horizon and, say, Test Drive Unlimited or the older Crew games, where it's too large to do a super in-depth analysis in this video, yet not big enough to disregard the individual pieces of the puzzle here. I do appreciate that this game has an entire playlist dedicated to showing off sections of Hawaii's beauty. And even more so, the vintage videos and tapes of Hawaii in the past during this playlist introduction is the cherry on top. We did want to go over something a little more important than the map as a whole though, and that's some of the race design of Motorfest. Thankfully, there's plenty to choose from in terms of event types here as we've mentioned beforehand. Time trials, outruns, drag, drift, some more unique ones such as in Donut. The majority of the driving and gameplay experience of Motorfest feels like a more refined and polished version of concepts brought up in its predecessor. But one of the Crew 2's most prominent complaints returns: the checkpoints. These flags mean nothing. Sometimes the true checkpoint is multiple meters past the width of these gates. Sometimes it's tighter than the gates. It makes you wonder why they still use these in the first place. Especially considering if you pass through one and then rewind, you don't have to go through it again, leading for the ability to cut tracks like they're nothing. We've been saying for a while now that this flag post system is decades out of style, and it's games like Motorfest and Horizon which are the leading culprits in the case of swapping these out for something new and worthy of next-gen innovation. Speaking of innovation, one of the most impressive feats Motorfest surmounts is taking what's familiar and transforming your perspective into feeling as if the cars you've already been driving for hours in the Crew 2 and making them feel new again. This is fed tangentially by something I don't think I've seen in any other racer, which is the ingenious ability to transfer your garage from the Crew 2 in its entirety to your Motorfest save. It's simple, it's easy, and Ivory Tower's way of throwing a sucker punch directly in the face of playground games by asserting our game's content is good enough to speak for itself. Transfer over your garage, play through it, and you'll see for yourself just how good Motorfest is. Just imagine if Horizon 5 did this. The player base would finally realize that 90% of the game is just working back for what you had in the last to mask the fact that there really are no change in each game. Anyways, now that we've sent the Horizon fans into orbit yet again, time to get back on track. It was a real treat to get into cars that I've spent so long working for in the Crew 2, and get that feeling of reuniting with an old friend, yet one that's better than you remember. Across the board, all of Motorfest vehicles have seen dramatic improvements to attention to detail and quality, something truly commendable in the days of this bullshit. Just between the Crew 2 and Motorfest, we've had the additions of full steering wheel rotation, windows that can go up and down so you can cruise with your arm out of the window, even more active aero bits, such as the McLaren Elva's wind diverter or the homebrewed open-wheeled racer's Huayra-inspired active winglets on the back. Cars can now sink into sand or mud and have debris sink up in the wheelbarrows. And this doesn't go to mention the drastic improvements in audio. We mentioned the Crew 2's lackluster sounds in our retrospective a few months ago, and the improvements are astonishing. Cars have unique starter noises, shift linkages can be heard on old cars, creaks and crashes of older interiors can be heard, complementing the commendable quality of the sounds as a whole. Honestly, when I first heard the LP800 Countach, which used a Gintani-equipped Aventador as the model, my mind was blown. It's the cacophony of quality sounds and realistically randomized backfires and pops which breathe so much more life into this car list. On that topic of car lists, the Crew Motorfest took an already standout list from the Crew 2, didn't cut 40% of it to slowly add back in over time as artificial game lengthening, and went on to add a cavalcade of shiny new model cars. For the sake of examples, we have the Bugatti Bolide, Lamborghini SCV12, McLaren Elva and Senna GTR, Nissan Z, S650 Mustang GT, Porsche Boxster Spyder, and of course the new Lamborghini Revuelto. Debatably even cooler on the more exuberant side of things, legions of concept cars through time, like the Bugatti Veyron Barchetta, Mercedes EQ Silver Arrow, Renault Trezor, and Lamborghini Terzo Millennio. Motorfest has debatably the greatest car list of any current open-world racer, and as we mentioned in the career segment, actually knows what to do with them, unlike competitors who just can't be bothered. I must appreciate that the Crew still lets you test drive vehicles before you buy them, but there's also a real disappointment since the pseudo dealerships and houses are gone. You can't really walk around your cars and appreciate them, and it's a real shame. The Crew 2 was the only current day racing game which could carry over that TDU2-like DNA, and it's a real shame that it's gone. What Motorfest does do to replace houses though is the main stage. The main stage is basically the main menu screen but in an interactive lobby form. You can check in on summits, playlists, and witness the single stankiest running animation in the industry. There is one standout feature though which is really neat, and that's the custom show. Custom Show allows players to customize and submit their own vehicles, in which are displayed throughout the interior of the main stage for yourself and Motorfest player base to vote on. The top 10 will be displayed on the top floor of this main hub, and honestly, it's puzzling why competitors which make such a big deal about community don't do something similar, but I digress. While there's a lot of praise to be given to Motorfest vehicles, there's plenty of nuance and design choices which are a little more of a mixed bag. Most prominently, what's been changed with the handling model. For the most part, Motorfest is evolutionary rather than revolutionary in comparison to the Crew 2's physics. As someone who appreciated aspects of the Crew 2's physics model and its reliance on learning weight transfer, leaning into a more unique and old-school fashion of having to really challenge your understanding of driving in order to get good, it's conflicting seeing what's been done to normalize Motorfest. Most of the time, I enjoy the new weighty feel of the cars, and it still feels very derivative of the Crew 2, but there's some incongruence to the handling model which throws me off of exclusively praise, the most prominent of which being oversteer. In a physics model which is reliant on a weight transfer to carry as much speed as possible through corners, oversteer is going to be your overwhelming foe. Motorfest's handling model has reduced the slipping point of your rear tires, leading to very inconsistent behavior, especially in the high-speed corners. It can really be a rhythm killer, as it also leads you to rely on the new rewind system, which, thankfully, unlike Forza, doesn't stop at random increments, but is a slider you can precisely get back to instantly. This oversteer wouldn't be anywhere near as big of a roadblock for this new handling's destination if countersteer was enough to save it. However, the angle in which countersteer can actually save a slide is severely grip limited in comparison to the rear, leading to some incredibly strange dissonance which disrupts an otherwise solid cornering model. There is one more design choice I found to not flow well, and that's the changes to braking. You really have to use your brakes more than you would expect to in Motorfest, and that's not exactly a choice that I like in comparison to the Crew 2 or other more arcade-focused models, which are more about exploiting car behavior and lines to get faster, rather than adding fake realism to an otherwise incredibly unrealistic physics model. The last thing to mention in the realm of physics is the speed attractors and detractors. What exactly do I mean by this? Obstacles like grass and dirt, for example, have a profound impact on your speed, which, if used strategically, can be used to slow your car down instead of braking. Now, I'm no comp player, but I can imagine this will be used to make competition even more fierce. Nitrous is the other end of the spectrum, giving you drastic boosts of speed for real short bursts. These bursts are insane. Nitrous also adds into that realm of strategy. Using it mid-corner is very risky, as it can lead into that snap oversteer we mentioned earlier. So it takes a really skilled player to figure out what the nuances and techniques are, and of course, because it's just so effective, it can really be what leads to winning or losing. Now there's one last can of Julian feed to open regarding Motorfest cars, and that is this upgrade system. I swear I remember hearing during the lead up to Motorfest launch that Ivory Tower would be ditching the Crew 2's upgrade system and heading back to something reminiscent of the original The Crew. Yet somehow this was dropped, and what we ended up with is the exact same system as the Crew 2. Now that would be fine if the Crew 2 didn't already have arguably the worst upgrade system in any current day racing game. We went over this system much more thoroughly in our The Crew 2 retrospective, but to pick up the standout detractors, I hate that parts are still won through randomized loot after race completion. I despise how it fixes affect cars to such a strong degree that players who want to be competitive in summits must require very specific parts which could take hours or days to get, completely disregarding the element of skill. And I pray that please, for the Crew 3, we revolutionized this system as it's been the Crew's most prominent flaw for years now. The Crew 2's online was always a bit of a contentious topic, launching with, well, nothing, and in the end innovating its way into what might be the best form of racing live service with the Summit, which alongside a few other tweaks, has held the crown as the king of competition within the Crew, meaning of course it's been transferred over to Motorfest mostly intact. For those of you who have not tried yet, the Summit is a series of events and stunts in which you'll compete against every player in your pool to be the best, with rewards being dealt out based on how well you stacked up to the competition, including some extremely exclusive rewards such as vanities and special edition cars that can't be obtained anywhere else. These sort of incentives have caused more players to attempt to be the best at these summits, when they otherwise may not have given it a passing glance. So with a setup like this, let's see what really made the Summit tick in the Crew 2 and how it's changed from there to Motorfest. In the Crew 2, Summits were first introduced in the Hot Shots update about a year into release, in which you would be able to race different classes in a total of 9 events, with the final event being a mix-up of track and car classes. These started out pretty tame as something like taking a hypercar to a street race, but could be something wild like a plane in a rally raid. Sadly, these sort of cross-class races are no more a thing in Motorfest, since class races aren't really a thing in this game. But that's not the only major change. The score you would need to unlock the exclusive cars was top 3000 on your platform, but this was later changed according to the average player base of the platform. Xbox players getting it the worst, having their top 3000 cut down to 2100, but PC and PlayStation players were definitely appeased by this, allowing top 4000 and 11,000 players respectively to gain the exclusive rewards. This however changed in Motorfest Summit with the introduction of crossplay. So what we have now is a global top 10,000 players applicable to gain exclusive rewards. Combining all the platforms from the Crew 2 who would have been able to gain the exclusive cars comes out to 17,100. So the potential pool of players to attain these vehicles has dropped by nearly half, which is sure to make competition way fiercer for Motorfest Summits. You'd think that players having to constantly push themselves to the limit to be the best in an organized event like this, it would all be fair, right? Unfortunately, you would be wrong. The Summit in concept should be equal to all players, but in practice, those with more time to kill would be able to benefit far more than those who can't afford to spend all day playing games, which is put into practice with the Crew Motorfest upgrade system. The different affixes given by legendary parts in the Crew Motorfest may seem negligible at first, but when you're competing to shave seconds off your runs, they really do make all of the difference. While grinding these parts is not all that hard, it is definitely time consuming, taking anywhere from a couple hours to even an entire day's work to try and get the set you need. Especially when it comes to things like the Scorebreaker set, which doubles your score for stunts, including those in the Summit. And then we have the races themselves. Take the Summit in which you could earn the exclusive Ford GT race car. Since all of the races were track events, those who managed to get a full Iron Grip multiplier beforehand could complete the races without ever having to pit once, while those who only brought their cars to the max level would struggle to maintain the same grip as those who grinded for days, and would end up having to pit, losing eons of time. This in combination with the fact that the Crew 2 inexplicably removed the feature to instantly swap all parts from another car of the same class, makes it so if you do have a full set for the Summit, you will go through the process of having to manually switch it on each car you run for each event, and this can get very tedious. This isn't the only issue with the Summit though, as players lucky enough to have friends around equal skill level to them will dominate over those who don't, as you can take a crew into Summit events, and anyone who knows anything about the crew racing, draft boots are frankly overpowered, leveraging an ability that most drivers won't have access to when trying to get their best times. With these in mind, the Summit is not at all perfect, but it's still a very good foundation to keep players interested in coming back for a purpose. The idea of competing against the entire world is indeed an enthralling one, which makes it so that when you're number one on that leaderboard, even if only for a few seconds, it makes it all the more special. But that's it for what's carried over from the Crew 2. What else does Motorfest have to offer in terms of its own content? Well, for that, we have the Grand Race. What sounds like a horrific idea in concept actually turned out to be one of the best online racing experiences since the days of Need for Speed 2010 and 2012's multiplayer. The idea of the Grand Race is to have a multi-mile long race which takes you approximately 15 minutes to finish, in which you'll swap class 3 times mid-race against 26 rival racers, all starting at once in a mad dash for who can get to the front of the pack and take home all of the glory. Now you might be thinking, won't this be unfair like the Summit, as those who've spent more time in the parts will have a much better chance of winning? And well, you'd be wrong actually, as the Grand Race equalizes all cars' performance so everyone has an equal playing field. The only difference is in what model car you choose to take and the individual strengths and weaknesses of that model. That aside, you're on your own. Now, beginning a grind race can get a little hectic, but once your early game breakfast simulator is over and everyone's settled into positions, race mode gets intense. Being up near the front with the weight of everyone behind you, you need to keep driving fast or you will get overtaken. But one mistake and you'll be sent flying down to double-digit placements. Some groups of racers may even split apart in distance, causing you to have to use the players around you as teammates to draft with in order to have a chance of catching up. And honestly, that's about the gist of the mode. It's simple yet somehow extremely effective. Not only that, but it also pays really well, giving out about 40 to 80,000 for a race depending on your placement. Plus, with crossplay now, finding a match really doesn't take all that long, so it's actually a pretty viable and fun method for getting parts and money. But that isn't the only new game mode the Crew Motorfest has added. We also have, Demolition Royale. Oh god, I'm getting post-traumatic eliminator disorder. Well, I guess I'm gonna give it a shot. We'll see, it's actually fun? I'm actually having fun in a racing game battle royale? Oh my goodness, how did they do it? Well, for one, people aren't spawning in cars twice as fast as you are, nor are most races decided by luck. In fact, there really isn't any luck factor involved, since we're not racing, but instead trying to ram and kill each other with the demo derby cars from the Crew 2. What a great way to reuse these cars from the old game. It's not quite as simple as that though. You'll be put into a team with 4 other players and will be forced to fly your battle bus into the arena. Once inside, you'll have these power-ups that appear all over the map that do various things such as heal you, give you extra health, increase your damage, or boost your monster truck gauge. The best part is, these buffs will apply to your entire time, so it's important to get as many as you can before you engage the enemy. Once you do find yourself in a scrap, you'll simply have to ram each other until one of you runs out of health. Once you're out of health, you're out permanently, and will have to rely on your teammates to try and defeat everyone else. You will also, however, have a monster truck gauge that you can fill by picking up its associated power-up. Once it's full, you can press a button to transform your demo derby car into a monster truck for a massive speed and damage increase. But it doesn't last very long, so you'll have to time it well. Plus, you're not invincible as a monster truck. You're still susceptible to getting T-boned by other vehicles and taking lots of damage. The winner is of course decided by which team is left standing as the last. This game mode is a lot more about strategy and thinking about what the correct time to approach is, when you should hang back and try to grab power-ups, or support your teammates. There's a lot of tactical plays you can make in such a simple game mode that's somehow a joy to play despite how done to death the concept is. And that's about it for the Crew Motorfest's online aspects. While it only really has 3 modes, all 3 are really well done and are a blast to play for the most part. I'd even argue this is some of the best just casual online racing we've had in nearly a decade now. Which isn't the highest bar, but it's still pretty damn good. If I had to add anything though, having new game modes to play around with would be nice, as only having 3 is a bit limited. But I'd prefer 3 well-made game modes compared to whatever these things are up to. But if you haven't yet, give the Crew Motorfest game modes a shot if you crave the spirit of competition that has felt lost in the wake of the modern era of racing games. While there's a lot to love about Motorfest, the lingering feeling I keep getting when I think back is that this game feels like more of a testbed for the future of the series. Considering how much the Crew 2 DNA makes up the skeleton of Motorfest, the fact that this still has a full $70 price tag is a bit steep. I hope that this isn't the replacement for the Crew 3, instead something to tide us over while a truly massive next generation the Crew 3 is in the works. The concept's laid in place for evolving the map through playlists, attention to details that most overlook, and Ivory Tower's continued ears to the community which feeds the development of future games gives me true hope for the future. I just can't quite say we're at the peak of what this series can be yet. For now, I can be happy with the extra push Motorfest adds in terms of competition and innovation in these days of monotonous arcade racers, and pray that it pays off across the genre as a whole. At the time of recording this video, we have just crossed the 25,000 subscriber milestone. It's been a long haul, and especially with us moving in the past month, this video has taken longer than we would have liked to get out to you. All that we can say is thank you for persevering with us and showing your support during this really hectic time. An extra special thank you goes out to those supporting us through YouTube memberships. We're trying our best to find more ways to interact with you all, and in doing so, wanted to mention, as we haven't quite in video form yet, that we have a Patreon. Look, I hate plugs as much as you do, I get it. And don't worry, the content on this channel won't be changing. Patrons, however, will be getting some exclusive perks such as connecting with us directly and shoutouts at the end of our videos, alongside a few behind the scenes things which I'm sure are going to excite you guys for the future of this channel or others. But that's enough self-promotion, as I'm starting to feel the YouTuber bug catching on. To conclude, thank you all so much for supporting us, no matter if it's something as simple as just watching these videos, especially to the end. It means more than you would expect, and we're excited to share some upcoming projects coming soon. Toodly-doo.